The West Tigers podcast is brought to you by the West Tigers Podcast Forum. Have your say on anything to do with the West Tigers, westtigerspodcast.com.au. It's the West Tigers podcast, episode number 368, and still in the early part of December. I get the feeling a little bit that kind of people are getting itchy feet, that we're getting a little bit anxious. We've been through a lot as West Tigers fans in the last 10 years, but more specifically, at least the last year, a lot of things coming together, a lot of things to look forward to. But a bit of a weird last week, I'd say, since the guys did the last edition of the podcast. I've got one word to describe the last week as a West Tigers fan, and the word, it's actually a two-word, one word. I've got mixed bag, kind of a mixed bag kind of feeling. A few little letdowns, a few little disappointments, but then you hear and see other things and you feel a little bit more optimistic. Almost a full house. We've got Steve and Nick and Gary. Anybody got any one-word contributions for the West Tigers experience in the last 7 to 10 days, guys?
Oh, well, I've got two. It's a bit like what you're saying, Joel. I've got two because it's a mixed bag. I want to say promising because things do seem to be heading in the right direction, and even with some negativity out there, there was still a response, from Jarome Luai that was quite positive. So we do seem to be tracking well for the next season. And I don't want to be negative, but I do have to say my other word is childish. The fact that there were 3 leaks, to me, reeks of a childish response from ex-employees, perhaps, or people that used to be associated with the club that still can't get over how they were seen to be inept or proven to be inept.
Yeah, exactly. We'll talk about Luai more specifically in a moment or two. I guess the thing with that, talking about those leaks, is it's hard to be definitive because there's probably 3 or 4 people that come to mind that I think would have been privy to the sort of information that did come out late last week. So it's hard to sort of knuckle it down to one person, but we certainly got our suspicions. Gary, a little bit of a rumour bubbling around the surface this evening, spotted on Facebook, which we always take with a massive grain of salt, but potentially some news around Lachlan Galvin maybe potentially re-signing with the club on a different contract.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. My one word was going to be a bit of a roller coaster because that's what it tends to be with West Tigers. And moving into this Galvin news, if it does come off, it's going up the upside of that roller coaster again. I think this would be a massive announcement. Could be a very nice Christmas present for the West Tigers fan base. So if, and I think it's still a very big if something has been sorted out with Lachlan Galvin and we're at a position where we're going to extend his contract, I think that would be a huge achievement for the club and kind of get rid of any negativity, well, tamper any negativity from the past week.
Yeah, it would certainly be a shot in the arm after the last few days. Interestingly, Gary's in a singlet, Nick's in a jacket. What's going on with you, Nick? Are you in Cooma or something?
No, it's funny. I've been complaining all weekend how hot it's been and humid. It's been horrific in Sydney, and then all of a sudden that southerly came through this afternoon. I'm walking around the house telling everyone how cold it is. So I don't know. I'm middle-aged, Joel, as most of us here are. So just.
You did remember to turn your air conditioner off. It's not still running there, is it?
Yeah. You know what? We've got very good ducted aircon here. We're very lucky in that respect. So yeah, the house is probably a bit cooler than outside.
All right, let's get on to Jarome Luai. Look, we heard the news earlier this year, 5-year deal. Everybody thought, oh my goodness, this is fantastic. This guy's investing in the club. He's making a real commitment. It seems nobody asked any questions back then. Are there any terms and conditions in regards to that 5 years? Maybe we probably could have or should have asked that question, but as we alluded to, as Steve alluded to, those leaks have come out So the first 2 years, but then you've got player options, and what that means is that from next year, from November next year, he can start to negotiate for that 2027. So definitely here for 1 year. Sometimes players get released early, like that's the absolute worst case scenario, that he's not even here for that second year. I'm going to ask you, Steve, because you did tee us off on this one. The club should have been more upfront with this. I think if that's what the deal is, you kind of got to give fans some idea that that's the terms with which he's come. I'm not surprised that they're there, and I'm not necessarily worried. I'm disappointed that they're there, but I thought the club probably should have got on the front foot and said, well, this is what it looks like.
Yeah, well, we had a situation a year or so ago where it seemed that our membership numbers had been fudged to us, and Richo came out and was quite strong in correcting those figures, and along with that he said that you need to be upfront and honest with your fan base and your members, and all power to him. That was really courageous of him and the right thing to do, even though the feeling at the time amongst Tiger fans was pretty aggressive against the club. He still had the courage to do that. So you'd think with that mantra, he'd maintain that right through all communication. Now, whether that's making too much of it, maybe he wasn't asked the question and therefore didn't really need to give an answer. But I'm a little disappointed that it wasn't communicated to us up front and openly and transparently. But at the end of the day, you know, if a player doesn't want to be at a club, he can get out of a contract, right? And so if we do 2 years and Luai doesn't want to be here because the place is a joke, then he'll go. He'll get out, right? Whether he has a clause or not. So from that respect, it doesn't overly worry me.
I think, just speaking from my own perspective, right, I think we're all probably fairly similar, is when that story broke, I know personally I was pretty flabbergasted that, but I got myself into a position thinking Luai's coming for 5 years. I'm thinking, that's amazing. Like, we've got a 5-year window where we can now build on our recruitment, knowing that Jerome's locked in. And you start to think about the juniors coming through, how old they're going to be in 2-3 years' time, what our team potentially might look like when you add those local juniors into the NRL team. And I guess it was like a kick in the guts to hear that, come November, as early as November next year, that it can start negotiating for 2026. But like you're saying, Steve, how often, though, does the CEO come out and publicise clauses within a contract? And I know that, Gary, we've had a couple of chats, and you pointed out there were a few players, I think, from an article that was posted a year or so ago. I think Dylan Brown might have been one of those guys.
Dylan Brown's got 6 years' worth of player options.
Yeah, so I wonder how common it is. It sounds like it might be fairly common, and that's what I'm thinking with the Galvin rumour that, if he has signed on. And I know I've made some jokes over the last week. I know I've said to you guys, we should lock him up for 10 years and give him 9 years of player options where he's got every opportunity, if he's not happy, to look elsewhere. And like you said, Steve, too, it's so easy and so common these days for a player just to walk out in a contract. So I guess this is why maybe it is fairly common that they put in these player options just to give that little opportunity. If there's a player that's disgruntled or not happy, it gives an opportunity to look around.
But for me, the hard part around the whole situation was that fact you were just talking about, Nick, of thinking, here we are, we've got a guy who has won 4 premierships. He's coming to our club for the next 5 years. Now, when that came out in the Chalmers story, I think it was late last week, that there was 2 years with 3 player options after that, I found that quite deflating. That was the biggest takeaway I had from it at that point in time, is that it was really deflating because I thought this was a guy we had here for 5 years. But what I found, I kind of understand why those clauses would be there. There could be any number of reasons why he's wanting to put those clauses into his contract. Because when you think about it, you have a look at our history as a club, and it might not be that, if we don't make the 8 in the next 2 years, he's going to walk out. It may have nothing to do with that. But you have a look, the example I've been giving with it is, you have a look at our history of turning over coaches at our club. Now, you have a guy who's coming to the club who who by all reports is coming to play under Benji Marshall. Now, I can see the reasoning behind him wanting to have clauses in a contract because he doesn't want to get 2-3 years down the track and the coaching structure's changed and he's playing under a guy for 4 years that he doesn't want to play under. So I can understand why he may look for those clauses, and it may not be anything around performance-based. It may be about being in an environment where he feels comfortable and wants to be. And so I can understand those clauses being put in there. As I said, the biggest feeling I had at the time, because if we had it came out on when he announced that he was signing and said, look, we're signing for 2 years, he's got 3 player options, I don't think anyone bats an eyelid at that. I think most people see that as a positive story. And the fact that the information about that came out last week, it's taken his signing and even those conditions around his signing, which would have been a positive story if it was announced at the time, and turns it into a deflating aspect for our fan base. And that's how I felt about it. But the one thing I will say about the club, and they've been saying it for a little while now, is that they don't discuss contracts. They don't discuss negotiations. They don't discuss players they're talking to. And if this is part of that setup, that we don't discuss these issues with the media or we don't put these issues out in public, then if that's the way they're going to run the club, and as long as that's how they kind of always do it, then I kind of do get it. But yeah, there are a lot of player options out there. Harry Grant has player options in his contract. There's a number of players who have played. Brandon Smith, the issues around his contract at the moment is there's player options in his contract as well. So they are there. They're not something I overly like, and it's not a situation I like to be in, but it's not that uncommon across the NRL.
I think the biggest thing for me, really, with this news is that it puts the club under pressure to perform in 25. And that, that may actually be a good thing, but we can't now say that 25 is a building year and hopefully we get a couple more players at the end of 25 for 26 and have a squad that can make the bottom of the 8 in 26 and push for the top of the 8 maybe in 27. We can't do that because if we have another dud year in 25, bottom dudgy I would define as bottom 3 or 4 team, on the ladder. If we have that, Luai will be approached by other clubs, and it will be in his head that he can move, and if he wants to, which will destabilise everything. And I mentioned Galvin because I was thinking of him as I was talking. The destabilisation will be whether we can keep Galvin or not. And that's dependent on the rumours that came out today, I suppose. But in short, I think it's put a bit of pressure on us to get moving in 25.
Look, to be honest, I think that pressure's there. It's probably amped up that pressure a little bit, but I think that pressure's there to really start to see progress next year anyway. Benji Marshall isn't going to survive a season where we finish bottom 4. So the pressure is there to at least get up towards the top 8 next season. I don't see any question that pressure wasn't already there. I'm hoping that the reason why he wanted those clauses isn't to do with performance, is more to do with the environment and more to do with the club following through on what they told him during negotiations. Like, you have a look at the turmoil our club's been in, and if you're a guy like Jerome Luai coming across to this club and you're being told, this is our plan forward, that's an awful big leap to trust that that's going to be the plan moving forward. So there's plenty of reasons why it could be there, not performance-based. But I do think that pressure's there anyway. We have to start moving up the table. Otherwise, we're going to be in a position where we're getting rid of a coach and we're kind of starting again. Hopefully we're not in a position where we're looking for another set of halves again after we spent the last 5 years trying to sort out the half situation.
Policy seems to be to not talk about contracts, not talk about these sorts of things, which is, I think, we're all pretty happy with. The only thing I'd say is that it might have been an opportunity for Richardson to sort of weaponise it a little bit, to give a few people the opportunity to pull their heads in. If this was coming a little bit close, if these rumours have come out from people that are a little bit closer to the club than people that departed 12 months ago, but for everybody up in that upper level of management to make sure that they're doing a good job of keeping the club on the right tracks, then basically got to say, we've got to be performing, we've got to be on the same hymn sheet, because otherwise we're going to lose this guy that we're trying to build the club around, and one of the guys that we're trying to build the club around, a key player, as you said, 4 premiership winner. So we could have maybe used it a little bit that way, but I understand that if the policy is that we don't talk about it, then we don't. I guess it's just kind of also, maybe we're all a little bit exhausted by it, because it's been so long since the negotiations started, and we've had a few little teasers of it, and he hasn't actually really officially started with the club, and so we sort of don't really feel like he's kind of ours yet, and then he's already maybe potentially looking, probably not, but there's that exit ramp is potentially not all that far away from him, and it's just the life of the West Tigers fan. It's a lot of
we can't have nice things, mate.
Exactly, waiting for that nice thing to be taken away from us at all time, which is a lot of anxiety around Galvin as well. It's that constant, when's the big fish going to come in and swoop him up? So hopefully that turns around in the next few years. I'll just ask the question. I can understand why he would sign a deal that has those options. I don't think I'd be signing. I'm not signing a 5-year contract to do the West Tigers podcast at this point. I'll do 2 years with an option on that third, because if we're still in the same spot we've been the last few years, there might not be a West Tigers podcast, or at least one with Joel involved anyway. So
you're going to head to the Panthers one? Is that the plan?
I'll be going to the Absolutely Nobody podcast. What would that be? The title.
Is that where Eddie's gone?
Yeah. Eddie's on a week-to-week contract. He's got a podcast option week-to-week. He's got player options everywhere. Exactly. Okay, so on the back of that, and going back to your original point, Steve, too coincidental, I think, that one dropped, bang, about Luai, and 2 days later comes out all these details about these pretty intricate kind of contract terms and conditions in Buller's contract. It just seemed too coincidental for me to think that this wasn't being fed to the media by somebody.
Yeah, well, of course, none of us know the truth around any of that, and it's all just hearsay and speculation on our part. But I agree with you, Joel. It does seem that those rumours have come from someone with an association with the club that would know some of the finer details. And if that is the case, then it's extremely poor, it's childish, and it's coming from someone who has very, very an axe to grind that can't seem to get over what everyone else knows was a reality of an inadequate performance.
Yeah. Apparently, Nick, he's going to Isaac Moses. Moses is going to be his new manager. And what the contract that he's currently got, he's contracted until the end of 2027, but it's that mutual option for no less than $900,000. If we don't want to pay that at that point, he can go and look elsewhere. We all know how Eddie feels. Eddie's not the biggest Buller fan in the world. It's a fair amount of money for Jahream Buller. Like, I don't necessarily think that's a terrible deal for the West Tigers when we think about. And I don't mean to. I can see the potential, and I'm not saying that I'm not a fan, but that kind of escape valve for us, maybe not such a bad thing if another option comes up.
I was thinking about this today, actually, and I'm not sure if the numbers in Zero Tackle website are accurate, but 2025-26, it's got 700K. So if we're looking at around 900 for that third year, it's a lot of money. And like you said, I can see the potential with Buller. I think he's got. We've seen what he can do defensively. He's excellent at cleaning up, a kick behind the line. He's great in cover defence. I think he's got huge potential that we haven't quite seen yet in attack. I think he showed glimpses of it. I know he was getting stuck a little bit running off the back of our halves, the first half of this season just gone. But he started to straighten up a little bit and create a little bit more opportunity at the back end of this season. And I think we're probably going to see the best of Jahream come out in 2025. So I'm looking forward to that. I don't want to think too far ahead. Kind of like what Steve said, there's a lot of pressure on 2025 now for us to perform, and I actually starting to think with the way that the contracts and all these clauses are sort of starting to come out, if it's all fairly accurate, I think 2025 could be a make or break season. Like, I'm starting to think if we don't make the 8, there's going to be that temptation for, players like Lockie, and it'd be interesting to see what comes out with this rumoured contract extension too, but it'd be very easy for him to start shopping himself around because he's going to be in hot demand. He's going to have every NRL club in the competition, asking for his services. So next year is massive. It's bigger than what I thought it is.
Yeah.
The Buller contract is actually, it's quite an interesting one. I think it's pretty good business from the West Tigers. I think having him for the next couple of years and then having an option to keep him after that is probably pretty smart. I think the contract protects both parties pretty well. So it's $900,000 if we want to pick up that player option. But if he goes away and negotiates, he can come back and pick up that. So it's $900,000 if we want to pick up the club option. If he goes away and negotiates and wants to come back, there's a player option there for him at $800,000. So if he can't kind of get to that $800,000 mark, he does have protection there to come back to the West Tigers at that $800,000. So I think it's probably pretty smart business, and I'm sure probably in the end they probably end up renegotiating and doing something in the middle of those, as long as his form continues to improve, which I'm quite hopeful it will. I think having the opportunity to play with a guy like Jerome Luai, I think is going to take his game to another level. So I expect to see his game bounce back next year. I thought at times last year, I'm not as hard on him as Eddie probably is, but I thought at times last year he did have a little bit of a second year syndrome during last season. But I expect to see him bounce back, especially I think we're going to be creating much more space for our forwards with especially with the Terrell May signing and the Hunt signing. I think we're going to get teams on the back foot a lot easier, and I think that's going to make his role, Buller's role, a lot easier to perform as well.
Yes, I'm going to channel my inner Eddie a little bit here. I have no problem with that amount of money being attributed towards a fullback in our salary cap. I'm sure that the club has a spreadsheet where they say, we're going to spend this percentage of our salary cap on this position, and go right through the roster like that. And you need a good fullback, and to win a combo, I dare say you need close to an elite fullback to do that. And so to put elite money aside for the fullback of choice is smart business. What it's up to now, in my opinion, it's up to both Buller and the club to make him the elite fullback that he's shown glimpses. I think it's up to him to knuckle down and do whatever has to be done to become that player. But I'm going to throw out there what I've said a number of times before and put it back on the club. It's up to the club to create the environment to help him become the very best he can be. And again, I'll say, I think the club are moving in the right direction in that regard. They're putting a better roster in place. They're putting experienced players bringing Luai to the club. You couldn't ask for anyone better for a bloke like Buller. So I think the money's good. Buller's just got to become the guy that deserves that money. And just my personal opinion, I think he will be.
And Gary, I mean, if you look at a lot of fullbacks, like when Dylan Edwards came along, the first couple of years of watching him, I'm thinking,
I wouldn't have wanted him.
Yeah, exactly. Like the ball is in to go on with Steve's point. There is a responsibility on the club to make sure that Buller gets there, but Buller also has to do this himself, and he's had these couple of difficult years. He's had these starting years. We've all been pretty impressed with what we've seen, but it hasn't been produced consistently. Really, theoretically, hopefully this just goes away by natural attrition because he's really hitting his punches by the time he gets to that part of his career.
I think next year is a key year in his career. I thought he came back to the pack a little bit last season. As I said earlier, I thought he was very good in his first season, but I don't think he hit the same heights last year. What I'd like to see him doing a lot more of, and I think we spoke about it a number of times during the season, is not just being the man who chimes into the back line on those sweep plays. I want to see him attacking through the middle. I want to see him following those big forwards we've got now through the middle. We've got a guy like Terrell May who has a really good offload. Buller's a guy I want to see pushing through the middle, looking for that offload. So there are definite areas of his game that he can work on. I think he needs to work a little bit on his passing because though it's good at times, I think it's a little bit inconsistent. Hopefully their conversations that Benji Marshall and the coaching staff are having with him. A controversial assistant coach appointment of Brett Hodgson for next season is probably a guy who can really assist with Buller's game. Hodjo's, in my books, the best fullback we've had at the club. One of the better fullbacks of the last 20 years. I think the way he played the game, because he played both the game in both those styles. He chimed in the back line and played as that extra ball player. He also played through the middle. So I think Brett Hodgson, while a controversial choice as assistant coach, could be really beneficial to a guy like Doreen Buller. So hopefully those conversations are happening right now. I know he's probably not training that much because he's coming back from the shoulder reconstruction, which may hold him back in the start of the season a little bit. But hopefully Hodjo's going through tape with him and working on it in all those other ways that you can off the training paddock.
Took the words right out of my mouth, Gary. I was going to say the same thing, and I know that this year it was publicised at the start of the year that Buller was being mentored by Greg Inglis, which was great. There's some cultural stuff there that they have in common, so that made sense from that perspective to get behind Jareem and show him the ropes a little bit, what it's like to play NRL. But I was about to say the same thing regarding Brett Hodgson. I can see some similarities between the two. Jareem's not a massively built frame. He's quite lean. He's probably more that basketballer type physique, and I know he's played a bit of basketball. But I can see similarities in the way that he plays, and I would like to see him push up and follow the ball players a bit more in attack. I think he really has that ability. He's got a good pass on him as well, and he's got some good evasiveness too. So, yeah, I'd like to see him work a lot closer with Brett Hodgson next year. I think he could be that X factor in attack that I don't think Eddie can see yet, but I know that it's in there.
It's funny, we've just mentioned a whole lot of stuff about him, and I agree with all that, but I reckon we've left out, for me, the number one thing. And that's his communication. And that's so important as a fullback. It's so important. And anyone who's played a bit of footy knows that, right? Like your defensive line takes all its cues from communication from the fullback. And if he's a naturally quiet guy. Now I don't know what he's like on the football field. Obviously, I've never been out there with him, but I've heard, and I'd presume from his personality, that getting him to communicate robustly and really move that defensive line around is something he'd need to work on. And there were times where we were caught short so many times, not just right out on the edges, right? Not just caught too short out in the flanks. There were times where we had gaping holes in the middle of the field. And that's where your fullback has got to tell players to shuffle left, shuffle right, and get into position. And he really needs to work on that, because our whole defensive pattern in some ways relies on him communicating the need at the time out in the field.
Yeah, good points, guys. Good points, and good points about Brett Hodgson as well. Like, if you think back to that 05 final series and the way that Hodgson was able to inject himself into the attack and provide that extra point of attack, it was a really, probably wouldn't have done it without Hodgson, I don't think, with what he provided.
No chance.
On the not so good scale, it looks like Hetherington's not going to be getting squeezed out of the Broncos at any point soon. It looks more likely that Jock Madden is on the move and on the outer at the Broncos. And I'm not going to be stupid. I'm not going to ask you the question. Does anybody want Jock Madden back? No,
Do you want to play him at lock?
Yeah.
Where's Declan when you need him?
Exactly. The Bateman to Souths rumour, guys, won't go away. Nothing concrete, but it keeps bubbling away there in the back. I guess they've kind of maybe can't afford Zoom or something in the UK. They're waiting for him to come back, in the middle of January or something, or swan back in. And he seems very, very laid back, John Bateman, at times. But it would be nice to get something resolved there. I guess we've got nothing really to add to that other than we'd all really like to see that come through. And on the positive side of the coin, Pepper Money with that big announcement, the biggest sponsorship deal in the club's history. Well done to everybody at the club for getting that across the line. In this market, it's a big achievement. It's something that should be definitely highlighted. And it is nice to see the jersey without a certain other big logo sitting out there in the front.
I'm going to buy one. First time in a while.
People are, yeah. But you've got like 10 to 12 weeks to wait for one.
Yeah, that's a little disappointing. I would have been buying one for Christmas, but can't do that.
Just on a style perspective, would you have preferred if the sponsor was just in the black rather than in the red and the white and the green? Do you think it looks a little bit odd, or should have been incorporated a bit more? Do you think, guys?
I don't know what Pepper Money's colours are and what their branding looks like, right? Apart from looking at the jersey, but I understand if there are companies out there that want their brand to look like their brand, and if that's their colours, and therefore it needs to be sort of painted in those colours in the middle of the jersey, then that's the way it is, right? They pay a lot of money. I don't know how much it is, but it's the biggest in the history of the club. So if that's what we have to put up with, then that's what we have to put up with. I think we can be a little bit precious at sometimes and pick and pick. I don't think it's a major problem.
Yeah, I do a lot of work in my current job with different company brands, and some are more flexible than others about what you do with their brand. Some are really quite strict on it. So while others, you can change font colors, you can move it around, you can break up the logo, you can use parts of the logo. If Pepper Money is a company that's really strict on their branding, I think for a team that's ran 3 wooden spoons in a row, beggars can't really be choosers. And if they're willing to pay out a decent sponsorship deal, then I think you brand the jersey how they want it branded. While it may not look as good for our supporters, and the integrated mock-ups that I've seen that other people have done look really good, I think it's about getting the best bang for Pepper Money's dollars at this point of where we are as a club. I see people pointing out that the Roosters always get nicely integrated jerseys, that the Panthers' current ones that they released last week had their sponsors' colours changed. When you're a consistent top 4 team or a 4-time in a row premiership winner, you can be a bit more bullish about these things than a team that's won 3 wooden spoons in a row.
I've got no issue with the colours of the Pepper Money branding at all. Like you said, that's their colours. But like you were talking about, Gary, with the integration, I know I found on the, might have been on X, someone had put rather than having the Pepper Money on a white square or rectangle, it had a white outline around the lettering. So it looks more integrated, and that looked quite sharp. But I can understand, like you're saying too, Joel, it's a big deal. The sponsor wants their logo to be seen. So on that white rectangle, which looks like a marathon bib, honestly looks like it's just been pinned on, but it stands out like a billboard. So they're getting maximum exposure. So, I'm actually looking at the Raw store. I've had it open all day today. I'm trying to work out what I'd like to buy myself when I go to the fan day this coming weekend. But I'm getting more and more used to the look of that Pepper Money logo on the jersey. It doesn't look too bad.
Yeah, I thought the integrated ones looked great from an aesthetic side. The company obviously wants it to stand out more, and that's what that white box is pretty much there for.
And they've just had 12 free plugs on the West Tigers podcast, so that's half the budget, accounted for the next year.
Just bill them, Joel. Exactly. Just send them a bill.
That's it. An add-on. Okay, and Terrell May, who has definitely been a big shot in the arm this off season. He's been on this podcast with James Graham. I've got to admit, guys, I didn't make it more than about 20 minutes. 20 minutes was about enough for me. I think a good podcast with a football player generally goes about 20 or 25 minutes. But he made some interesting comments about his exit from the Roosters. He was very bullish, believes there's still improvement in him. Did you guys catch the interview? Did you have any thoughts on how he came across? I thought he genuinely seemed pretty hurt and disappointed the way it happened at the Roosters, Nick. And to me, he looks like a guy that wants to come and be that leader that we need.
He sure did, Joel, and I got through the entire podcast, which was about an hour and a quarter. So I took the dog on a long walk this afternoon, listened to the whole lot, but I enjoyed it. It was a little bit difficult to listen to, just the way that he comes across. But when you get through or past that point and you listen to the type of person that he actually is, the way he speaks about himself, and I know that there's some controversy with his family. I'm not going to get into that, but just the way that he talks about the way that he and his brothers are brought up by their father. Their father was very strict on them, and he pushed them very hard from a very young age to get into rugby league because he was a big NRL fan. He said at the age of 6 he was running hills, and he said it was that hard, but it taught him hard work and sort of good ethics and morals from a very young age, to the point that he actually maintains those values now. So it's funny because when we signed him, that article came out saying that he'd been quoted during the year as saying he could easily walk away from the game, which made it sound like he wasn't overly invested in what he was doing. But the way he actually talked to James Graham about his future at the West Tigers, he sounded extremely positive. One thing he said, he can't wait to come here because the West Tigers are a club that wants him, whereas he felt rejected by the Roosters. Because he wants to come here and be a leader. He says he knows he's at the age of 25 and coming into his prime. So he knows he's coming here to lead that forward pack. So he's going to come and set examples like Jerome has said as well. So I can only see positives coming from Terrell coming across. And you know what? He was also a part of that pod as well. He was talking about how he'd rather play internationals at the back end of the year because it extends out his off-season. He doesn't have to start training till later. And then I thought, okay, well, that's good. He enjoys his footy, but he's enjoying his time off. But at the same time, he said he's actually started a 75-day challenge. And he was, at the time of recording that pod, which I assume is a week or so ago, he was 29 days in. So the day after he returned from his Samoa duties, he started this 75-day challenge where he's doing 2 45-minute workouts per day. It's all bodyweight stuff. And on top of that, every second day, he's running 10 kilometres with his brothers just around the neighbourhood. And he said come December this year, well, it's December now, he's got a mate that wants to run a marathon with him. So they're just going to do a 42-kilometre run around somewhere, and that's just the goal that he's got. So that sort of mentality, that just gets me excited. Like, that's a person that's going to come and set standards that are probably above what they're doing in the gym at Concord. Like, these are extras. So if he can bring that to the club and get other guys around him to be sort of, drawn to that sort of behaviour and act a little bit like him, I think that's a huge positive for the club.
I really, and it's something that I can sort of, from personal experience, the difference when you're working in an environment where you know that you're really wanted is a big difference. I really liked that he said that. I think he really liked that we really made him feel like he was going to be an important part of what we want to do. And, I think that can make a big difference to how a player, and we've talked a little bit about culture in the last few weeks and the last few pods and things. But if you've got guys that are buying in because they feel they genuinely loved and wanted by the club, that's starting to build a good environment, Gary.
Yeah, it is. And I think when you have a look at his time at the Roosters, the last couple of days there's been a few little stories that have come out that Terrell May's very proud of his Western Suburbs upbringing and his Mount Druitt upbringing. That is a sense of an area of pride for him. And there's been a few stories over the last couple of days come out about how he didn't integrate into the Eastern Suburbs lifestyle of the Roosters as well as they wanted him to. So that the fact that he's very proud Western Suburbs man, very proud of his upbringing, and there is a very big culture difference between the Western Suburbs of Sydney and the Eastern Suburbs of Sydney. So I don't know the reasoning, and by the sounds of it, he doesn't overly know the reasoning for the Roosters letting him go after signing him to a new contract 6 months ago. maybe that's played a role into it. I guess no one's ever going to know because it sounded like it was about a 2-minute conversation that Trent Robertson had with him to inform him that he was no longer wanted at the Roosters. So
I think Ben Hunt was a factor. Ben Hunt had to have been a factor there.
But yeah, didn't they blow that up though? Because I think St. George would have been quite interested in a guy like May, and yeah, maybe if those two clubs had have spoken to each other, they could have got a deal worked out there. Luckily for us, they didn't. But yeah, I do think Ben Hunt coming onto the market wasn't a key reason why they were looking to move someone like Terrell May on.
Yeah, something shifted quickly, Steve.
Well, I heard they offered Terrell May a new set of teeth, and he knocked them back. And that was the end of that. Just didn't finish.
Yeah, that they weren't gold teeth. Like,
yeah, Tedesco wanted to keep his. They want Tedesco's back.
Yeah. The big pair of pliers waiting on his last game. Yeah.
Look, for me with Terrell May, there's two things. I haven't seen that or listened to that podcast yet, but it's. The word leadership is coming up, and I wouldn't have associated that with Terrell May, and I don't want to say too much about it until I've watched him play and actually see it. But if he's bringing leadership to our pack, that was the thing I said a few weeks ago, that he's a great signing, but still we haven't got the leader we need. But maybe he's talking the fact that he can be, and if that's the case, that's fantastic. Because we need it, and more power to him. That's the sort of bloke you want in your roster, right? And the other thing I've got to say about this, that I'm loving, and Gary just alluded to it, is I'm just loving watching the Roosters implode, because this is just so not Roosters, but Robbo, you're in trouble, mate. You're in trouble.
Yeah, how nice is it going to be when they miss the 8 next year, Steve?
Round 5, Robbo's gone.
But for me, around that leadership part, Steve. Look, I don't know whether he's going to develop into that forward leader that we're really crying out for, that we're desperate for. But the thing I'll say about him, he's at the age where he's at right age to do that right now.
Yeah,
he's a 25-year-old guy. He still doesn't have a lot of games under his belt, but he's 25 years old. It's not a guy. Leaders that we've kind of signed in the past have been guys who are that 29 to 30-year-old who are coming out of the other side of it, and while they may be able to pass on some experience, the performance on the field, you have a look at like Tamu and Clemmer are prime examples of guys that we've brought in to lead our pack who really haven't been able to produce it on the field, and that's been the issue. So hopefully this is a guy that can develop those leadership skills. I don't know whether he has them, but hopefully he's the guy that can do that, and instead of being a guy that who's probably good on the training paddock and probably good around the dressing room, leadership-wise, they need to be able to contribute on the field. So hopefully he can develop those leadership skills, because I think he's definitely going to be a guy that's contributing on the field to us. If you have a look at the season he had last year, if we get a season close to what he produced last year, we've really won out with this signing.
And when you take Royce Hunt into there in terms of impact as well, we've got a little bit more variety than we did last year, which
much more variety.
I'm pretty sure I'm reading Nick's mind, because Terrell May in the podcast made some pretty strong statements about having played with Jared Warrior-Hargraves and how he wants to be the alpha leader of the pack, just like Jared has been for the Roosters, which is music to all of our ears, of course. But he also said, I want to be the guy that the opposition coaches really target. We want to shut down Terrell May and to overcome that, to be that player. And that was really heartening to hear that. Nick made me feel, and I know people say things in the off season, it's easy to say the words, but we might have a real good one on our hands here.
The other thing he said too in that pod was, he said, James Graham said to him, what are your aspirations for coming to West Tigers? And May said to him, I'm coming to win a ring. He said, I know that, a lot of people are going to laugh and say to me, you're going to the Tigers. That's not going to happen. But he accepts nothing less than winning a competition. He says that's his mentality every year. So whether that's realistic next year is probably unlikely from looking from the outside in. However, that mentality, if he's going in there with that sort of state of mind, and like Jerome's going to be the same. Like, they're coming in wanting to win round 1. They're going to want to win round 2. They're going to want to win every game that they play. But that's the type of mentality that you need to start then bleeding through the rest of the players as well. So if they can get that frame of mind going from round one, then I am quite excited for what we might see.
Can I just say, just on that was the perfect segue into what I wanted to say, Nick, is about getting excited. You don't want to get too excited this early, right? But I tell you what, when you look at the pieces of the puzzle coming together with our tight forwards, just focusing on our tight forwards, you know, you have, if Terrell May and Hunt bring the aggression that we've seen and can do that consistently, that is going to help Clemmer. It's going to take some pressure off Clemmer and May up his game. It's going to be great for Seafarth if we play him as a tight player, and it's going to be great for Pole as well. And all of a sudden, as our main, and I've left Twal out, right? But as those guys, as our tight forwards on rotation, that's got the makings of a really strong go-forward pack.
Yeah, I think we're looking really good in the props, Steve. There's still some big concerns about second row, and I think that's something we need to get sorted for next year. If we get that second row position sorted out, we've got a top quality forward pack. And if you had went back like 3-4 weeks ago, I was really worried about our forward pack, and I think most people were. And if we can get an addition of a really strong second rower, then this team can really do something next year.
And that's a really good point, Gary, in that, like, to get a good second rower, we don't want Seafarth to become that second rower, right? Like,
He can't, mate.
Seafarth has got to stay in the rotation of the tight forwards, and we find a block-busting wide running second rower from outside. That would weaken our middle. We don't want that.
100%. The strength you get with Seafarth is I would have him coming off the bench. The strength you get is if you do get an injury in that second row, you can put him in there to plug a hole. But if we're going into next season and we've got him as our starting second rower for the season, that's what our plan is. That's a big hole in our side, and he's got a big role to play next year. We need it not to be that second row role. We need someone from outside the club, and to that point, I know, like, I think it's fairly obvious that the club has promised Sione Fainu an upgrade to a top 30 spot. That can't happen until that second row spot is sorted out, in my opinion. I don't think we can get rid of Bateman this week and then turn around and say, "Here, Sione, here's the top 30 contract that you're waiting for." I think we've got to get that second row spot sorted out first, because Sione Fainu is another prop into that prop rotation that I think we've already done a really good job of improving. And it's really hard. I really hate saying it, because I thought Sione Fainu had a great season last year. He developed really, really nicely and really started to contribute well to our side and deserves a top 30 spot. We've just, at the moment, I don't think that top 30 spot is there for him just yet.
Well, the other factor you've got to take in there as well is if you're going to play Fanua Pole at lock, then where are you putting Jack Bird? But if you're going to move Fanua Pole into the prop rotation, well, then you've all of a sudden you've got 5 guys, 6 guys there sort of lining up ready to play in 4 positions. So, that's
which you do
dynamic.
Over a long season. You do need, you do need the guys there, and having Twal and Sione playing reserve grade and getting a call up when some injuries hit, it will be a really good luxury to have. I really don't want to see Pole go into that lock forward role. I think we need. Well, his footwork at the line is really good in that role. His ability to shore up the defence in the middle that you really want from that lock position, I don't think he has yet. And I don't think he has the ball playing that I really want to see from that role. So I really want to see him in the prop rotation. I'd be really disappointed if, through having Bird in that lock role and then having to move Pole into the lock role to give Bird a break, or just starting Pole in that lock role, I'd prefer we didn't have to do that going into next season. So there are still a few things to sort out in that forward pack, but if we can get them sorted out in the next month or so, it's starting to look like a really strong forward pack moving into next season.
Nick, there's a lot of questions there. Oh, sorry, Steve, I'll come back to this. A lot of questions there in regards to the lineup for round one, as compared to last year. Last year, we could probably all pretty much, with 95% get there, penciling in what the team was. But this year, there's a lot of questions. I mean, you've still got guys like Dewey and Naden and Staines and Seyfarth and Twal and, wondering Stafford Tower and other guys that you're going to wonder how and where they're going to line up in all of this. A lot of questions at this point, which is kind of doing our heads in a little bit because we don't quite have that definitive answer.
It makes the trials a little bit different, doesn't it? Just puts a bit more emphasis on those trial games next year, early next year. So, yeah, a lot of positions, with question marks over them. New players coming in. It will be very interesting to see what Benji does with the team. So, we've all got possibilities or thoughts of who might end up where, but I really don't know who's going to play lock. I don't know who's going to be in the back row. I'll throw a curly one in there, and you guys will probably shoot it down, which is fine. Stafford Tower, could he play back row?
No.
He's a bigger body. I'm just thinking he can ball play a little bit. I'm wondering if you could put him out there. If you could,
I don't think he's defensively strong enough. I don't think his defence would hold up in the middle at all. Look, the benefit we do have is we have a guy like Terrell May. The part of his game that doesn't really get spoken about much is his defence. Like, he's got a 97, 98% tackle efficiency or something ridiculous. Something that's not far off what 12 was doing, and also provides impact and hits hard in defence. So we are shoring up that middle of the defence. I think if you're putting Toa in the middle to defend, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. Plus, while he may be able to ball play, can you see him pushing out 80 to 100 metres a game in the middle of the field? Because in that lock role, while you need a ball play, you need to be able to push out some metres as well. I just don't see him having the ability to do that.
Did you say lock or second row, Nick?
Second row.
Second row, yeah. So he's talking second row.
I didn't listen properly. Are you surprised, Steve?
No. The question I had just goes back to Jack Bird a lot, because that's obviously where Benji's thinking, if all the articles are true. And Gary, you mentioned not wanting to see Pole sort of in that lock position, but can you see Jack Bird playing lock and defensively lock for 80 minutes?
No, that's 100%. That's a concern I have, Steve.
Yeah. So that's where I can see Pole maybe starting a game, absorbing that 15, 20 minutes, and then Jack Bird going into that lock role for the rest of the game.
If you're going to do that, that's how I'd like you to do it, is to start with Pole there for 15 minutes and then have Bird finish out the rest of the game, and Pole then goes into that prop rotation. I think if you are going to play him in that role, it has to be kind of at the start of the game. But the sooner we kind of get that second row spot and that lock spot worked out properly, and we can use Pole, I think we're doing him a little bit of a disservice at the moment by swapping and changing him. And I know there's a lot of clubs that play that lock role as a third prop. He's a young guy. What is he? He's still only 22 or something. Mm-hmm. And I think it's time we kind of develop him properly and put him into a role, and that's going to be your role. And when you're switching him from prop to lock, that's the concern I have with it, is you're kind of messing up his development a little bit, because you're asking him to do two roles in a game. And he's a guy who's while is starting to get a little bit of experience, is still only 22 years old.
I don't know. I don't know. I reckon that is a specialist position now. Mm. All right, which is interesting coming from me, right? Because I'm usually the one with the old-fashioned thinking, right? But I reckon that 13 that plays the tough carries in the middle, plus the additional half ball playing role, that is now becoming, in the modern game, a specialist position. And I reckon you could actually craft him, and that is your role, mate. That's what you're going to be doing.
Do you think he has the ball playing to do that, Steve?
Yeah, good question. I don't know that. I think he has the middle for it. I think he has the middle. I don't know if he has that link role ability.
Whereas,
So
I can't. There's no moment that comes to mind where I saw it pronounced on the field, I suppose.
you can sort of
Yeah,
compare and contrast that with
sorry.
Matamua, who maybe you might say provides that ability to ball play that little bit more, but maybe other parts of his game not as strong as Pole. So, yeah, another mystery, that one. Go, Gary. I think you had another point.
Yeah, all I was going to say, Steve, is that's my only concern with him playing that lock role, is he doesn't have... we haven't seen his ability to do that ball playing. Like, we've been talking about Matamua for how long now? Like 3-4 years. If he could suddenly... I know Richo mentioned him, and few people got excited because he was speaking about how fit and how hard he's working. If he could somehow fill that role that we kind of expected him to fill 2 years ago, it would make a massive difference to this team. I don't see him doing it, but boy, would that make a difference.
Well, Terrell May's a late bloomer. Maybe Justin Matamua is a late bloomer.
Exactly.
Well, and some forwards are, mate. Like, some forwards just don't come on to hit that 24, 25, 26 age range. That there's been guys who have had quite good careers who didn't debut in the NRL until they were 25, 26. So it's not impossible.
I think Nick was trying to find his modern day Dean Hallertau to play lock when you're raising your Stafford Toa option there.
Yeah, Dean Hallertau, what a good player he was. He could feel.
There's only one Dean Hallertau.
There is. Great fella.
Any interest in Brandon Smith?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Gary is sitting on the fence.
The only issue there, sorry, Gary, is with his knee, right? Because he's out until, I think it's June. He's not due back on the field. So if potentially the Roosters would have let him go and we were to bring him in, how many rounds is he going to miss? It's a good half of the year, right?
Yeah, look, that is the concern, and it's a concern I have. I don't know that he's really probably a long-term option in that role. He seems to burn out of clubs fairly sort of quickly. So I don't know whether he's a guy you'd be signing and hoping he's going to play there for the next 5 years. So if you're looking at 2 to 3 years for him playing and he's out for half to 3/4 of the season of that first year, where's really the value? That's the concern I'd have.
I'd give him 5 years and 3 years of player options.
Just a copy-paste of Luai, but not quite the same amount of money.
Yeah, lower it.
Yeah.
Take a couple of zeros off.
Exactly. He is a winner, but Steve, isn't he? Like, he knows how to win football games. He's a tough competitor. Maybe not quite, firing on all cylinders off the field, apparently, but, on the field, certainly would be a big contributor.
Yeah, and that would be my concern. I think he's a great footballer. I love watching him. I don't think he's a great dummy half. I really don't. I think
his time there is done, Steve. I think.
I think if he came, it'd be for the 13. But my concern, he's sort of got shoved out of the storm. He doesn't seem to be all that secure at the Roosters, and you've got to ask yourself why. Is he a team player? Is he part of the group? Does he cause trouble? I don't know. Right? I'm not suggesting he does. I don't know, but you've got to ask those questions.
So I kind of just had doubts about him through off-field. I did say to you 2 weeks ago, Steve, that I wasn't going to do that anymore. So I'm going to look at the football side, and on the football side of the field, he's a guy that can contribute to the club.
Yeah, but I'd have to disagree with him because he has off-field issues.
He's got some Eddie Otto vibes going on about him, Brandon Smith. He's
There's
a bit of a loose
definite
unit,
Eddie Otto vibes.
Yeah, exactly.
Brandon Smith's probably out there having a vodka Red Bull right now.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're probably out there somewhere together. That's why Eddie's not on the pod tonight. He's out with Brendan Smith trying to get him across the line to come to the Tigers.
100%. All right, guys. Thank you very much. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks, Steve,
guys.
Gary.
Thanks, boys.